You probably stole that credit card. People like you don't belong anywhere near first class. Rebecca Sterling stands in the aisle, her finger jabbing aggressively toward Maya Johnson's face. Passengers freeze mid-conversation, phones sliding out of designer bags to capture the confrontation unfolding at 35,000 feet. Maya sits motionless in seat 2A, her vintage aviator watch steady on her wrist as she closes her Boeing technical manual. Rebecca's voice rises with each venomous word. Security is going to drag you off this plane in handcuffs when we land. Without warning, Rebecca's hand whips across Maya's face. The impact sends Maya's head sideways, passengers gasping as the assault plays out in real time. Maya slowly turns back, touching her burning cheek. Her voice carries deadly calm. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. What Rebecca doesn't know, in 15 minutes, Maya will be the only person who can save everyone aboard. 3 hours earlier, Maya Johnson had kissed her 16-year-old daughter Zoe goodbye at their modest suburban home in Silver Spring, Maryland. The first-class ticket to Los Angeles sat in her weathered leather briefcase alongside technical schematics for next-generation flight control systems, a consulting contract that would pay more than her military pension provided in 6 months. At 45, Maya moved with the precise bearing of someone who had commanded million-dollar fighter jets through hostile skies over Afghanistan and Iraq. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore her favorite jeans with a faded Howard University sweatshirt, the same casual uniform that had gotten her suspicious stares at every upscale establishment from Pentagon briefings to corporate boardrooms. The Boeing 777-300ER gleamed under the harsh terminal lights at JFK, its American Airlines livery pristine against the gray October sky. Flight 447 was a prestigious route, always packed with Manhattan executives, Hollywood celebrities, and old money families who considered first class their birthright. Maya settled into seat 2A, running her thumb over the inscription on her father's 1943 Elgin aviator watch. Captain James Johnson, Tuskegee Airman, 1943 to 1945. Her father had worn this watch through 32 combat missions over Nazi Germany, fighting for a country that refused to let him fly commercially after the war ended. Now his daughter carried his legacy in aerospace consulting, designing safety systems for the very airlines that would have rejected him based on skin color alone. Rebecca Sterling supervised the first-class cabin with military precision, but her version of order came with a heavy dose of social gatekeeping. At 35, she had worked this route for 8 years, long enough to develop strong opinions about who belonged in premium seating and who was trying to game the system. Her blonde hair was pulled into a regulation chignon, her makeup flawless despite the evening departure, her smile practiced and cold. Rebecca prided herself on spotting the fakes, the newly rich tech bros who didn't understand proper etiquette, the social media influencers trying to upgrade their images, the diversity hires who thought they deserved the same treatment as paying customers. She had a sixth sense for people who didn't belong, and everything about Maya Johnson triggered her internal alarms. The passenger manifest for Flight 447 showed 347 souls aboard, 12 in first class, 48 in business, and 287 in economy. Among them sat federal judge Patricia Hendricks, 3 Fortune 500 CEOs, actress Carmen Rodriguez, fresh from her latest Marvel premiere, 2 honeymooning couples celebrating their Napa Valley wedding, dozens of business travelers and families heading to Disneyland with wide-eyed children. In the cockpit, Captain Derek Walsh conducted his pre-flight check with the methodical precision of 28 years in commercial aviation. At 52, he had logged over 15,000 flight hours without a single incident, earning him the respect of crews and passengers alike. His first officer, Tom Brooks, represented the new generation of pilots, 34 years old, MIT educated, with exceptional instrument skills and an obsessive attention to detail that complemented Walsh's experience perfectly. Neither man had any reason to expect this Tuesday evening would be anything other than a routine cross-country flight. The weather was clear, the aircraft had passed all inspections, and their passenger load was typical for the route. The only notation in the maintenance log was a routine hydraulic pump replacement completed the previous day, standard procedure that wouldn't raise eyebrows in any experienced cockpit. As the massive aircraft pushed back from Gate 12, Maya felt the familiar thrill of takeoff preparation that had never faded despite decades of flying. She unconsciously noted the engine sound during taxi, the angle of the wing flaps during configuration, the subtle vibrations that told her everything was functioning within normal parameters. 25 years had passed since she last sat in a cockpit as pilot in command, but some instincts never faded. Maya opened her tablet to review the Boeing 777 technical specifications she'd been hired to analyze, part of a comprehensive safety audit for a major airline manufacturer. The hydraulic system diagrams filled her screen, detailed schematics that would look like incomprehensible hieroglyphics to most passengers, but read like familiar blueprints to her trained eye. Rebecca Sterling, meanwhile, was preparing for what she considered the most important part of her job, maintaining the exclusive atmosphere that first-class passengers expected and deserved, and that meant identifying and removing anyone who didn't meet her carefully cultivated standards of appropriate clientele. The Boeing 777 climbed smoothly into the darkening sky above New York, carrying its precious cargo of lives toward a destination none of them would reach as planned. 30 minutes into the flight, at cruising altitude over Pennsylvania, Rebecca Sterling made her move. She had spent the time watching Maya like a hawk, noting every detail that reinforced her suspicions. The casual clothes that screamed discount store, the way she hunched over technical documents like some wannabe engineer, the complete lack of designer accessories that marked real first-class passengers. Rebecca approached with her service cart, but this wasn't about beverages. This was about maintaining standards. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Rebecca's voice carried the sugary sweetness of professional hospitality laced with poison. "I'm going to need to verify your payment method for this seat." Maya looked up from her hydraulic systems analysis, genuinely confused. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your credit card, for verification purposes." Rebecca's smile could have cut glass. "We've had some issues lately with fraudulent first-class bookings, people using stolen cards, fake names, that sort of thing." The lie hung in the pressurized air like toxic smoke. Other passengers turned to stare. Judge Hendricks raised her eyebrows from seat 1C. Actress Carmen Rodriguez pulled out her phone from 3A, sensing drama that could trend on social media. Maya's jaw tightened slightly. In 25 years of military service and 10 years in aerospace consulting, she had never, not once, been asked to verify payment after boarding and takeoff. I don't think that's standard procedure," Maya said evenly, her voice carrying the controlled calm of someone accustomed to hostile situations. Rebecca's mask slipped just enough to reveal the contempt underneath. "Ma'am, when passengers don't follow normal booking patterns, we have to take precautions. I'm sure you understand." The coded language was expertly crafted, plausibly deniable in any formal complaint, but unmistakably clear to everyone listening. Maya's booking pattern was suspicious because Maya was black. Her presence required explanation because Maya didn't look like Rebecca's vision of first-class worthiness. "What exactly about my booking pattern concerns you?" Maya asked, her military training keeping her voice level despite the adrenaline building in her system. "Well," Rebecca glanced meaningfully at Maya's casual attire, "our typical first-class passengers tend to present differently. They understand the standards we maintain up here." The businessman in 1B shifted uncomfortably, his laptop screen reflecting the uncomfortable truth that he was witnessing discrimination in real time. But he said nothing, just like the others. Privilege, Maya had learned, came with built-in silence. "I paid for this seat with my corporate American Express card," Maya said quietly, "the same way I've paid for hundreds of flights over the past decade." "Of course you did." Rebecca's tone dripped with theatrical disbelief. "I'm sure it's all perfectly legitimate, but you'll understand if I need to see some documentation. Company policy." Maya reached for her wallet, her father's aviator watch catching the cabin lighting. As she moved, Rebecca's eyes fell on the technical manual displayed on Maya's tablet, detailed Boeing 777 hydraulic system schematics that looked like something stolen from an aircraft maintenance facility. "Playing airplane games on your tablet?" Rebecca asked with a patronizing laugh that carried just far enough for other passengers to hear. How adorable. Let me guess, flight simulator enthusiast? That comment hit Maya like a physical blow. Not because of its condescension, but because Rebecca had just dismissed Maya's life's work, her expertise, her father's legacy, as a hobby game. Maya stood slowly, her 5'7" frame carrying the unmistakable bearing of someone who had commanded fighter jets in combat zones. Those aren't games. Those are technical specifications for the aircraft we're currently flying at 500 miles per hour, 7 miles above the ground. Rebecca's eyes flashed with something between fear and fury. A passenger, especially this passenger, wasn't supposed to challenge her authority, wasn't supposed to speak with confidence about technical matters, wasn't supposed to stand up. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to sit down immediately and stop being disruptive to other passengers. I'm not being disruptive, I'm being questioned about my right to sit in a seat I legally purchased because you've made assumptions about who I am based on how I look. The cabin fell silent except for the steady drone of engines. Phone cameras discreetly turned their way. The businessman in 1B was definitely recording now, already composing his LinkedIn post about witnessing discrimination at 35,000 feet. Rebecca's composure cracked completely. Her voice rose to a level that everyone in first class could hear clearly. Look, I don't know what kind of affirmative action program got you this seat, but this is first class. This is where people who actually contribute to society sit, not people who game the system. Judge Hendricks audibly gasped. Actress Rodriguez was already live tweeting the incident. An elderly couple in row 4 looked horrified but made no move to intervene. Maya felt the familiar cold fury that had gotten her through dogfights over hostile territory. But she also felt something else, the weight of her father's watch on her wrist, reminding her that she carried the legacy of men who had faced worse hatred and still completed their missions with dignity. Ma'am, Maya said quietly, you might want to familiarize yourself with the technical specifications in that manual. According to the maintenance logs I'm reviewing, this aircraft had hydraulic pressure irregularities during its last inspection. Rebecca scoffed loudly, her voice carrying to every corner of the premium cabin. I don't take airplane advice from passengers who probably learned everything they know from video games, and I certainly don't take advice from people who shouldn't be in first class to begin with. Maya's finger traced a line on her tablet screen, highlighting a specific system diagram that showed hydraulic pressure sensors and backup systems. The primary hydraulic pump was replaced yesterday. The system is showing intermittent pressure drops. The flight crew should monitor those gauges closely during descent. It was technical information delivered in the calm, professional tone of someone who absolutely knew what she was talking about. But Rebecca had already made her choice about Maya's worth and credibility. Ma'am, stop trying to scare passengers with your airplane fantasies. Rebecca's voice turned vicious. People like you always think you're smarter than everyone else, don't you? Always trying to prove you belong somewhere you don't. Maya looked up one final time, her dark eyes meeting Rebecca's blue ones with the steady gaze of someone who had stared down enemy aircraft and lived to tell about it. I really hope I'm wrong about those hydraulic readings, she said quietly. But Rebecca was far from finished. She had an audience now, and years of barely contained prejudice came pouring out. Wrong? You're wrong about everything, starting with thinking you deserve to be here. 2 hours into the flight, somewhere over Colorado, Maya felt it. A subtle vibration through the aircraft frame that most passengers would never notice. Her finger paused on the tablet screen. Her father's watch ticked steadily as she tilted her head, listening with ears trained by thousands of flight hours. There it was again, a minute irregularity in the engine harmonics, so slight that only someone with extensive cockpit experience would recognize it. Maya glanced toward the cockpit, then back at the hydraulic system diagram. The maintenance notes she'd been reviewing suddenly felt less like academic consultation and more like prophecy. In the cockpit, Captain Walsh was experiencing his first hint of concern. A yellow warning light had flickered briefly on his hydraulic panel. So briefly, he'd almost missed it. Tom, did you catch that hydraulic light? He asked First Officer Brooks. Chen checked his instruments. Nothing showing here, Captain. All readings are nominal. Walsh nodded but made a mental note. In 28 years of flying, he'd learned to trust his instincts about aircraft behavior. Maya felt the vibration again, more pronounced. She looked around the cabin. No one else noticed. The businessman worked on his laptop. Actress Rodriguez slept. Judge Hendricks read legal briefs. Rebecca Sterling was in the galley, still seething from their earlier confrontation. She'd already called her supervisor, spinning the story as an aggressive passenger making wild claims about aircraft systems. Maya unbuckled and walked to the galley quietly. "I need to speak with the captain immediately," she said in a low voice. Rebecca's head snapped up, eyes flashing. "Absolutely not. Return to your seat before I have you restrained. This aircraft is experiencing hydraulic pressure variations. The vibrations started 20 minutes ago and are increasing. The captain needs to know." Rebecca laughed dismissively. "You are not a pilot. You're having airplane fantasies, and if you don't sit down, I'll have federal marshals waiting when we land." Maya showed her the maintenance records on her phone. Technical specifications for aircraft N847AA. "These are the actual maintenance logs. Hydraulic pump replaced yesterday due to pressure irregularities. We need to alert the cockpit. I don't care what games you're playing on your phone. Return to your seat now or I'll have you arrested for interfering with flight operations." That's when the aircraft shuddered. It was subtle. Most passengers barely registered it as turbulence. But Maya's trained senses picked up everything. The minor altitude fluctuation, the engine sound variation, the way the aircraft felt different. "Did you feel that?" Maya asked urgently. Rebecca had felt it, but her pride was invested in dismissing everything Maya said. "Turbulence? Perfectly normal. Now return to your seat." Maya looked toward the cockpit door, calculating options. In military aviation, she could override the flight attendant. But civilian operations were different. Flight attendants controlled cockpit access. "I'm asking you to trust me. Something is developing with the hydraulic systems. The captain needs to run diagnostics before it becomes critical." Rebecca's response was final. "If you approach that cockpit or continue disrupting this flight with airplane fantasies, I'll ensure federal marshals drag you off in handcuffs. Sit down and shut up." Maya stared at her, seeing not just individual prejudice but an entire system of assumptions. Her father's watch ticked steadily, marking increasingly precious seconds. "When this gets worse, and it will get worse, remember that I tried to help," Maya said quietly. She returned to her seat and opened emergency procedures on her tablet. If Rebecca wouldn't let her prevent the crisis, she'd be prepared for it. The aircraft shuddered again, more noticeably. A few passengers looked up with mild concern before returning to their distractions. Maya began memorizing emergency landing protocols, her mind already running through hydraulic failure scenarios and backup systems. The Boeing 777 was a robust aircraft, but it had limitations, and those limitations were about to be tested. The third shudder came 40 minutes later, strong enough to wake sleeping passengers and rattle the beverage cart. This time, Captain Walsh felt it deep in his bones, the kind of vibration that separated routine turbulence from genuine mechanical issues. "Okay, that's definitely not weather," he told Brooks, his hands instinctively tightening on the controls. "Pull up full hydraulic diagnostics." Chen's fingers flew across the console, calling up system displays that hadn't been needed since simulator training. "Captain, I'm showing intermittent pressure drops in the primary hydraulic system. Backup is holding steady, but the fluctuations are increasing. Run a complete systems check. If we lose primary, we're flying on backup only until landing." Maya felt the aircraft's subtle altitude changes as the pilots began their diagnostics. She recognized the flight pattern immediately, careful, methodical tests of control surfaces that most passengers would interpret as minor course corrections. Her tablet now displayed Boeing 777 emergency landing procedures, information she'd memorized decades ago but never hoped to use. In the galley, Rebecca was fielding nervous passenger questions about the bumpy ride. Her confidence was beginning to waver, but her pride refused to acknowledge that Maya might have been right about anything. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time. A woman in economy screamed briefly. Coffee spilled in business class. The seatbelt sign chimed on with urgent authority. Captain Walsh's voice crackled over the intercom, professional but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're experiencing some minor technical difficulties with our hydraulic systems. As a precaution, we're diverting to Denver International Airport for inspection. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for early landing." Maya closed her eyes and listened to the engine sounds with trained ears. The pilots were reducing power, beginning a gradual descent, professional by the book, exactly what she would have done in their position. But she could hear something else in the aircraft's behavior, a subtle asymmetry in control responses that suggested the hydraulic problem was deteriorating faster than the cockpit realized. Rebecca rushed past Maya's seat, her face pale but her jaw set with stubborn determination. Maya caught her arm gently but firmly. "This is exactly what I was trying to warn you about," Maya said quietly. "The hydraulic system is failing progressively. The pilots don't know how severe it's becoming." Rebecca jerked her arm away violently. "Stop! Just stop with your ridiculous airplane fantasies. The pilots are trained professionals. They're handling everything perfectly." "Look at me." Maya's voice carried the unmistakable authority of command. "Really look at me? Do I seem like someone who would lie about aircraft systems during an actual emergency?" For the first time since boarding, Rebecca actually looked, truly looked, at Maya. She saw the calm competence in Maya's posture, the way her eyes automatically tracked the aircraft's subtle movements, the professional manner in which she held herself while crisis developed around them. Who are you?" Rebecca whispered, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. Before Maya could answer, the aircraft dropped. Not turbulence, not a minor altitude adjustment. A sudden stomach-lurching loss of altitude that sent unbuckled passengers into the ceiling and triggered immediate deployment of oxygen masks throughout the cabin. Emergency lighting bathed the cabin in ominous yellow. The aircraft was descending rapidly, too rapidly. Maya could feel the pilots fighting the controls, trying to arrest the descent with severely limited hydraulic authority. Captain Walsh's voice came over the intercom again, strained but maintaining professional calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost primary hydraulic pressure. We are declaring a full emergency and proceeding immediately to Denver International Airport. Flight attendants initiate emergency landing procedures immediately." Maya was moving before the announcement finished. She unbuckled and stood despite the steep descent angle, using her father's watch to time the aircraft's rate of descent. Too fast, much too fast for a controlled approach. "Ma'am, sit down!" Rebecca shouted, her own voice cracking with barely controlled panic. "Return to your seat immediately!" "Rebecca!" Maya's voice cut through the chaos like a precision instrument. "I'm a pilot, 25 years, United States Air Force, fighter jets, transport aircraft, emergency landings under combat conditions. I need to get to that cockpit right now." Rebecca stared at her, the words not computing with everything she'd assumed about Maya's background and qualifications. That's impossible. You're a passenger. You're wearing jeans. You're black? A woman? Not what you expected a military pilot to look like?" Maya's eyes blazed with intensity. "I'm also the only person on this aircraft with the experience to help those pilots land this plane safely with total hydraulic failure." The aircraft shuddered violently, rolling slightly to the left before the pilots corrected with engine thrust alone. Somewhere in the economy, multiple people were praying loudly. The businessman in 1B was gripping his armrest so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Flight attendants to stations for emergency landing." Captain Walsh's voice carried new urgency that penetrated even Rebecca's shock. Maya grabbed Rebecca's shoulders, her grip firm but not painful. "Listen to me very carefully. Those pilots are excellent, but they've never landed a 777 with complete hydraulic failure. I have. Not this exact aircraft, but similar emergency situations. They need help, and I'm qualified to provide it." Rebecca's professional training warred violently with her deeply held prejudices. Every procedure she'd memorized said never allow unauthorized passengers in the cockpit during emergencies. But her survival instincts were screaming that this calm, competent woman might be their only hope of surviving the next 20 minutes. "You're really a pilot?" she whispered, her voice almost childlike. Maya unclasped her father's watch and showed Rebecca the inscription. "Captain James Johnson, Tuskegee Airman, 1,943 to 1,945 inches. Then she pulled out her wallet and handed Rebecca her retired military ID. "Colonel Maya Johnson, United States Air Force, fighter pilot, retired." Rebecca's hands shook as she read the identification. Colonel, fighter pilot, 25 years of military service. "Oh, God!" Rebecca breathed, the full weight of her prejudice and its consequences crashing down on her. "Oh my God, what have I done?" "You've acted according to your assumptions," Maya said with surprising gentleness, taking back her ID. "But right now we need to focus on getting everyone home safely. Can you get me access to that cockpit?" The aircraft dropped again, more severely this time. The descent angle was approaching the edge of recoverable territory. Maya could hear the engine straining as the pilots fought to maintain control with backup systems that were clearly failing. Rebecca made the most important decision of her life. "Follow me," she said, leading Maya toward the cockpit with newfound determination. "And Maya, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry." Maya squeezed her shoulder as they moved forward together. "We'll sort that out on the ground. Right now, let's make sure we get there in one piece." At the cockpit door, Rebecca used her master key with trembling fingers and knocked urgently. "Captain Walsh? I have a passenger who says she's a qualified pilot. She wants to help." Captain Walsh's voice came through the door, strained with the effort of fighting unresponsive controls. "Not now. We're dealing with complete hydraulic failure here." Maya stepped forward and spoke clearly through the reinforced door. "Captain, this is Colonel Maya Johnson, United States Air Force, retired. I have extensive experience with emergency landings in degraded aircraft. May I offer assistance?" A pause. The aircraft shuddered again, and Maya could hear the pilots struggling with manual controls. "Colonel? Did you say Colonel?" "Yes, sir. F-16 Falcon pilot, C-130 Hercules qualified, KC-135 Stratotanker certified, 4,000 flight hours in military aircraft, including multiple emergency landings with hydraulic failures. I know this isn't standard protocol, but you might need another pair of trained hands." The electronic lock clicked. The cockpit door opened. Captain Walsh turned in his pilot's seat, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought controls that barely responded to his inputs. His eyes widened as he took in Maya's appearance. Casual clothes, natural hair, the complete opposite of what he'd expected when she'd identified herself as a colonel. "Ma'am, I don't mean to question your credentials, but—" Maya was already scanning the instrument panel with practiced efficiency, her trained eyes immediately identifying critical readings and system status displays. "Primary hydraulic system at 0 pressure. Backup showing 28% and dropping. Engine asymmetry indicating partial control surface response. Captain, you're in serious trouble." The technical assessment, delivered with matter-of-fact precision and using exact terminology, stopped Walsh's questions immediately. This woman knew exactly what she was looking at. "Who did you say you were?" First Officer Brooks asked, his voice tight with stress as he struggled with backup instruments. Maya pulled out her military ID and handed it to Walsh while simultaneously reading the backup flight displays. "Colonel Maya Johnson, retired, F-16 Falcon primary, but I've flown everything from single-engine trainers to strategic transport aircraft. I've brought damaged birds home with no hydraulics, failed engines, and once with half a wing missing over Kandahar." Walsh examined the identification card, his expression shifting rapidly from skepticism to amazement to relief. "Tuskegee legacy? My father flew P-51 Mustangs against the Luftwaffe." Maya's voice carried quiet pride even in the midst of crisis. "He taught me that you don't abandon an aircraft until it's in pieces on the ground." The aircraft shuddered violently again, the nose dropping more steeply. Brooks was fighting the controls with everything he had, but the backup hydraulics were degrading faster than any of their training scenarios had predicted. "Colonel," Walsh said formally, abandoning any pretense of normal passenger protocols, "I officially request your assistance. We're 18 minutes from Denver, but I'm not confident we have 18 minutes of hydraulic pressure remaining." Maya slipped into the jump seat behind the pilots, her hands automatically reaching for backup controls that existed in military aircraft but were configured differently in civilian planes. "What's your current plan, Captain?" "Emergency approach to Denver International, runway 34 right. It's our longest available runway for the approach vector." Maya shook her head decisively. "Negative. Not with this rate of hydraulic degradation. You need at least 9,000 feet minimum for a no-hydraulics landing in a 777. Runway 34 right is only 8,000 feet. "That's all air traffic control has cleared us for," Brooks said through gritted teeth, his hands cramping from the physical effort of manual control. "Then we need to change their minds," Maya said, leaning forward to point at the navigation display. "Runway 16 right. The parallel runway is 12,000 feet. Normally used for departures, but we're not dealing with normal circumstances. Air traffic control will never approve that approach in current conditions." Maya's eyes met Walsh's in the reflection of the instrument panel, pilot to pilot, professional to professional. "Captain, with all due respect, air traffic control doesn't have to land this aircraft, you do. And I'm telling you that with our current hydraulic status and degradation rate, 12,000 feet is the difference between a hard landing and a smoking crater." Walsh reached for his radio with newfound determination. "Denver approach, American 447 declaring emergency. Complete hydraulic failure, requesting immediate vectors to runway 16 right. American 447 runway 16 right is not available for landing approach. Proceed to runway 34 right as previously cleared. Denver approach, American 447. We have a qualified military pilot on board advising us that we require the longer runway for hydraulic failure emergency landing, requesting immediate clearance to runway 16 right. American 447, identify the military pilot," came the crisp voice from Denver Approach Control. Maya took the radio without hesitation. "Denver Approach, this is Colonel Maya Johnson, United States Air Force, retired. I have experience with emergency landings in hydraulically compromised aircraft. We need runway 16 right for maximum landing distance." A longer pause filled the cockpit. Maya could imagine the chaos in Denver's approach control room as controllers scrambled to verify her credentials and weigh an unprecedented request. "Colonel Johnson, Denver approach. Can you confirm your aircraft type experience? Negative on Boeing 777 specific experience, but positive on emergency landing procedures, hydraulic failure protocols, and manual reversion techniques. Captain Walsh remains pilot in command. I'm advisory only. American 447 cleared for emergency approach runway 16 right. Emergency vehicles are rolling. Colonel Johnson, you're cleared to assist." Maya handed the radio back to Walsh, who was looking at her with a mixture of respect and desperation. "Ma'am, Colonel, how do you want to approach this?" "Your aircraft, Captain. You maintain pilot-in-command authority. But if I may suggest, prepare for manual trim control, engine-only steering, and a very long, very flat approach. We're going to come in hot and let physics handle most of the deceleration." "Altitude 12,000 feet, descending," Brooks reported, his voice strained from fighting unresponsive controls. "Backup hydraulics now at 15% and falling fast." "Airspeed 280 knots, Walsh added. "We're coming in faster than any normal approach." Maya's eyes moved constantly between instruments and the distant runway lights beginning to appear through the cockpit windows. "That's exactly what we want, Captain. Hot is survivable. Slow without hydraulics is fatal. Don't try to reduce speed until we absolutely have no choice." The approach to Denver International Airport became a masterclass in crisis management under impossible conditions. Maya positioned herself where she could see both pilot displays and reach backup controls, her hands moving over systems she hadn't touched in 25 years, while muscle memory guided her through procedures that had saved her life in combat zones. 10,000 feet, Brooks called out. "Hydraulics at 12%. "Perfect descent rate," Maya confirmed, watching the glide slope indicators. "Captain, we need to discuss manual reversion procedures. When backup hydraulics fail completely, and they will, you'll have engine steering only, rudder control through differential thrust." Walsh's knuckles were white on the yoke that barely responded to his inputs. "I've never landed a 777 with zero hydraulics." "But you've handled engine failures, correct? Same fundamental principle, just reversed. Instead of using engines for thrust and hydraulics for control, you use engines for steering and gravity for descent management." In the cabin behind them, Rebecca Sterling was conducting emergency procedures with newfound urgency and desperate hope. The passengers had been briefed on crash positions and emergency exits, but what they didn't know was that their survival depended entirely on the expertise of the woman Rebecca had assaulted 3 hours earlier. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca announced over the intercom, her voice steadier than she felt, "we will be landing shortly under emergency conditions. I want you to know that we have an exceptionally qualified pilot assisting our flight crew. Please follow all instructions exactly and prepare for a harder-than-normal landing." 8,000 feet, Brooks reported. Backup hydraulics at 8% and dropping. Maya reached forward and began manually adjusting trim tabs, her movements precise and economical. I'm setting manual trim for approach configuration. When the hydraulics fail completely, don't fight the aircraft. Let it settle into its natural glide slope. The runway appeared ahead, a ribbon of light stretching across the Colorado darkness like a landing strip into eternity. Emergency vehicles lined both sides, their red and blue strobes creating a tunnel of color that guided them toward salvation or disaster. 6,000 feet, hydraulics at 5%. Captain, Maya's voice carried the absolute authority of someone who had faced death and taught others to survive it. In approximately 90 seconds, you're going to lose all hydraulic assistance. When that happens, this aircraft will want to drop its nose and accelerate. Let it happen. Don't fight the natural tendency. But we'll be coming in too fast for a safe landing. Yes, we will. But we'll also be coming in controllable. Speed we can manage with runway distance and reverse thrust. Control authority we cannot recover once it's gone. 4,000 feet. Hydraulics at 2%. Walsh keyed the radio with trembling fingers. Denver Tower, American 447 on final approach, expecting no hydraulics landing. American 447, you are cleared to land, runway 16 right. Emergency response team standing by. 3,000 feet, hydraulics at 1%. That's when the backup hydraulic system failed completely. The aircraft immediately pitched nose down, gaining speed rapidly as all control surface authority disappeared. Walsh instinctively pulled back on the yoke, but the flight controls were completely dead, useless pieces of metal and cable connected to nothing. I've lost all control of my response, Walsh shouted, his training warring with natural panic. Stay calm. Maya's voice cut through his fear like a blade. Engine control only now. Add power to engine 1, reduce power to engine 2, use a thrust differential to level us out. Walsh's hands moved to the throttle levers, the only controls that still functioned. The asymmetric thrust slowly brought the aircraft's nose up, but they were still descending rapidly and gaining dangerous speed. 2,000 feet, airspeed 320 knots. That's too fast, Brooks's voice cracked with barely controlled terror. No, it's not, Maya said with deadly calm. Physics will decelerate us when we contact that runway. Our job is to hit it straight, level, and under control. She reached between the pilots and fine-tuned the engine trim settings. Captain, quarter power on engine 2, half power on engine 1. Keep that runway centerline directly in your front windscreen. The massive aircraft began to level out gradually, but they were still approaching at nearly twice normal landing speed. Maya's father's watch ticked steadily on her wrist as she calculated approach angles and energy management in her head. 1,000 feet, speed 290 knots. Maya could see individual runway lights now, emergency vehicles positioned along the approach path, the foam that ground crews had sprayed on the touchdown zone. Everything depended on the next 60 seconds. 500 feet. The runway rushed toward them like a concrete river. Maya made final mental calculations of descent rate, approach angle, and energy management. When we touch down, she instructed with absolute authority, immediate full reverse thrust on both engines. Don't worry about smoothness. Worry about stopping before we run out of runway. 300 feet, speed 270 knots. 200 feet, 100 feet, Captain, flare now. Walsh reduced power on both engines simultaneously. The aircraft's nose came up slightly, bleeding off just enough speed to avoid a catastrophic impact while maintaining enough energy to stay controllable. The main landing gear struck the runway with tremendous force. The aircraft bounced violently, came down again, and bounced once more. Walsh immediately applied full reverse thrust, the engines screaming as they fought to slow the massive aircraft. Stay on center line! Maya shouted over the incredible noise of reverse thrust and tire friction. The aircraft was decelerating, but slowly. Runway distance markers flashed past at frightening speed. 9,000 feet remaining, 8,000, 7,000. Brakes aren't responding, Brooks yelled over the noise. Expected, Maya replied. No hydraulics means no brake pressure. Keep maximum reverse thrust. 6,000 feet remaining, 5,000, 4,000. They were slowing, but not fast enough. Maya could see the end of the runway approaching with mathematical certainty. Captain, we need to exit the runway while we still have control. Taxiway Bravo, right turn. Use an engine power differential to steer us off. We're still doing 80 knots. Better to leave the runway under control than leave it as smoking wreckage. Right turn now. Walsh added power to the left engine and reduced the right. The massive Boeing 777 began a lumbering right turn onto the taxiway, its right main gear leaving the pavement and digging into the soft ground beyond. The aircraft slewed sideways but continued to decelerate. Finally, 500 yards from the runway, American Airlines Flight 447 came to rest in the Colorado Prairie, intact, upright, and with 347 souls still breathing. For a moment, the cockpit was silent except for the ticking of Maya's father's watch and the distant sound of approaching emergency vehicles. Walsh turned to Maya, his face pale but alive. "Colonel, thank you for saving my aircraft and everyone on it." Maya smiled, exhaustion finally showing in her eyes. "Thank you for trusting me, Captain. Now let's get these people home." The evacuation slides deployed with their distinctive hiss, bright yellow fabric unfurling against the dark Colorado prairie. Passengers began their orderly exit from the aircraft. Maya was among the last to leave, having stayed in the cockpit to help Walsh and Brooks complete post-emergency procedures. As she walked down the slide, Maya was met by emergency responders, airline officials, and news crews who had already gotten word of the miraculous landing. Camera flashes lit up the prairie, but Maya's attention focused on one person. Rebecca Sterling stood at the bottom, her perfect makeup destroyed by tears, her professional composure shattered. She fell to her knees as Maya approached, grabbing her hands desperately. "I'm so sorry," Rebecca sobbed. "You saved all of us, you saved my life, and I treated you like trash. I hit you. How can you ever forgive me?" Maya gently pulled Rebecca to her feet. "You treated me according to your assumptions. But we're all here. We're all breathing, and that's what matters. How can you be so calm? How can you forgive me?" Maya looked at her father's aviator watch, still ticking steadily. "Because my father taught me that holding on to anger weighs you down when you need to fly. And tonight, we all needed to fly." Captain Walsh appeared at Maya's side, still in uniform but looking aged by the ordeal. "Colonel Johnson, I've contacted the NTSB and FAA. Your intervention was crucial to our successful landing. You saved 347 lives tonight." Maya shook his hand firmly. "We all did, Captain. We worked as a team when it mattered." A reporter pushed forward with a microphone. "Colonel Johnson, how does it feel to go from being discriminated against to saving everyone on the plane?" Maya paused, looking back at the Boeing 777 sitting in the prairie, emergency lights still flashing around it. "It feels like Tuesday," she said simply. "This is what we train for. This is why we serve, not for recognition or revenge, but for moments when people need us to be better than we thought we could be." She looked directly at Rebecca, who was still crying quietly. "All of us." Within 24 hours, the story of American Airlines Flight 447 had exploded across every news platform and social media channel in America. The cell phone videos from passengers showing Rebecca's assault and Maya's calm professionalism went viral instantly, generating millions of views and sparking nationwide conversations about racial bias, hidden expertise, and the assumptions we make about people based on appearance. Maya returned home to Silver Spring to find news vans lining her quiet suburban street and reporters camping on her front lawn. Her 16-year-old daughter, Zoe, greeted her at the door with a mixture of pride and teenage exasperation. "Mom, you're literally everywhere," Zoe said, showing her phone screen filled with social media posts, news articles, and memes. "Everyone's sharing videos of you in that cockpit. My friends think you're a superhero." Maya hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the weight of normalcy after 36 hours of surreal celebrity. "I'm not a superhero, sweetheart. I just did my job when people needed help." But the recognition was undeniable and unprecedented. Within a week, Maya had received calls from the Secretary of the Air Force, the Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration, and executives from 3 major aerospace companies offering lucrative consulting contracts that would triple her current income. The businessman from Seat 1B, who had recorded the entire confrontation, published a LinkedIn article titled, "The Colonel in 2A, What I Learned About Assumptions at 35,000 Feet." The post was shared over 2 million times within 48 hours, becoming one of the platform's most viral content pieces ever. Actress Carmen Rodriguez used her massive social media following to launch a campaign called Hidden Heroes, highlighting people whose expertise and contributions are overlooked due to unconscious bias. Maya became the campaign's first featured story, reaching an audience of over 50 million people worldwide. Rebecca Sterling faced immediate and severe consequences. American Airlines suspended her pending a comprehensive investigation, and the viral videos led to federal charges for assault in federal airspace, a felony that carried potential prison time and would end her aviation career permanently. But Maya did something that surprised everyone, including her own legal team. She testified on Rebecca's behalf during the sentencing hearing. "Your Honor," Maya said in the packed Denver federal courtroom, "what happened on that aircraft was wrong. The assault was inexcusable and the discrimination was harmful. But what happened afterward, when Rebecca chose to trust me enough to get me into that cockpit, that showed the capacity for growth and change. People can evolve beyond their worst moments. She helped save 347 lives, including her own. Rebecca received 2 years of probation instead of prison time, along with mandatory community service in racial bias education programs and a permanent ban from working as flight crew. She sent Maya a handwritten letter every month for the following year, documenting her journey toward understanding her own prejudices and working to undo the harm she had caused. Captain Walsh and First Officer Brooks were formally commended by the FAA for their professionalism during the emergency and their willingness to accept outside assistance under extraordinary circumstances. Walsh personally nominated Maya for the Federal Aviation Administration's highest civilian honor for heroism. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came 6 months later, when Maya was invited as the keynote speaker at the Tuskegee Airmen National Convention. Standing at the podium where her father had once spoken decades earlier, wearing his aviator watch and addressing an audience of pilots, veterans, and aerospace professionals, Maya felt the weight of history and progress. "My father used to say that the sky doesn't care about the color of your skin or the assumptions people make about you," Maya told the packed auditorium. "The sky only cares whether you can fly. Every time we prove our worth despite the odds, we open the door a little wider for someone else to walk through and soar." 10 message and CTA, 5%. Target, approximately 375 words. As Maya settled into her new office at American Airlines headquarters, she kept 2 items on her desk: her father's aviator watch and a photograph from Flight 447's emergency landing. Not the dramatic shots that made headlines worldwide, but a quiet image. Rebecca and Maya shaking hands at Denver Terminal, both women forever changed. The watch still kept perfect time, its steady tick marking moments that matter. James Johnson had worn it through combat over Nazi Germany, fighting for a country that didn't always value his contributions. His daughter wore it through her own battles. And one unforgettable evening when 347 lives hung between prejudice and expertise. Maya's new role as Director of Emergency Procedures Training came with one unusual condition. Rebecca Sterling would join her team, helping educate crews about unconscious bias and hidden expertise in every community. "We all carry invisible credentials," Maya told flight crews during training. "The question isn't whether someone belongs in first class or anywhere else. The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize their value before we desperately need their help." Flight 447's story became more than viral content. It sparked real change in airline training, emergency procedures, and how society thinks about snap judgments we make when meeting someone new. Her favorite message came from a young Latina pilot. "Colonel Johnson, I watched your video before my check ride. When the examiner seemed surprised I knew procedures perfectly, I remembered what you said about skills speaking louder than assumptions. I passed. Thank you for showing me our competence doesn't need permission to exist." Maya smiled, glancing at her father's watch. Still keeping perfect time. Still marking moments when ordinary people do extraordinary things. What hidden expertise exists in your life? What assumptions are you making about people around you right now? If this story changed how you see the world, share it. Hit that share button and tag someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below with your own story of being underestimated or underestimating someone else. Subscribe for more stories that challenge assumptions and celebrate hidden heroes. Because the next time someone surprises you with their competence, remember, they're not the exception. They're the rule we've been too blind to see.